Anthropomorphism is the attribution of human traits, emotions, and intentions to non-human entities and is considered to be an innate tendency of human psychology. Personification is the related attribution of human form and characteristics to abstract concepts such as nations and natural forces like seasons and the weather. People have also routinely attributed human emotions and behavioral traits to wild as well as domestic animals. Name: anthropomorphism derives from its verb form anthropomorphize, itself derived from the Greek anthropos and morphe. It is first attested in 1753, originally in reference to the heresy of applying a human form to the Christian God. Examples in prehistory: from the beginnings of human behavioral modernity in the Upper Paleolithic, about 40,000 years ago, examples of zoomorphic works of art occur that may represent the earliest evidence we have of anthropomorphism. One of the oldest known is an ivory sculpture, the Lowenmensch figurine, Germany, a human-shaped figurine with the head of a lioness or lion, determined to be about 32,000 years old. It is not possible to say what these prehistoric artworks represent. A more recent example is the Sorcerer, an enigmatic cave painting from the Trois Frères cave, Erriga, France. The figure's significance is unknown, but it is usually interpreted as some kind of great spirit or master of the animals. In either case there is an element of anthropomorphism. This anthropomorphic art has been linked by archaeologist Stephen Mithen with the emergence of more systematic hunting practices in the Upper Paleolithic. He proposes that these are the product of a change in the architecture of the human mind, an increasing fluidity between the natural history and social intelligences, where anthropomorphism allowed hunters to identify empathetically with hunted animals and better predict their movements. In religion and mythology. In religion and mythology, anthropomorphism refers to the perception of a divine being or beings in human form, or the recognition of human qualities in these beings. Ancient mythologies frequently represented the divine as deities with human forms and qualities. They resemble human beings not only in appearance and personality, they exhibited many human behaviors that were used to explain natural phenomena, creation, and historical events. The deities fell in love, married, had children, fought battles, wielded weapons, and rode horses and chariots. They feasted on special foods, and sometimes required sacrifices of food, beverage, and sacred objects to be made by human beings. Some anthropomorphic deities represented specific human concepts, such as love, war, fertility, beauty, or the seasons. Anthropomorphic deities exhibited human qualities such as beauty, wisdom, and power, and sometimes human weaknesses such as greed, hatred, jealousy, and uncontrollable anger. Greek deities such as Zeus and Apollo often were depicted in human form, exhibiting both commendable and despicable human traits. Anthropomorphism in this case is referred to as anthropotheism. From the perspective of adherents to religions in which humans were created in the form of the divine, the phenomenon may be considered theomorphism, or the giving of divine qualities to humans. Anthropomorphism has cropped up as a Christian heresy, particularly prominently with the audience in 3rd century Syria, but also in 4th century Egypt and 10th century Italy. This often was based on a literal interpretation of Genesis chapter 1 verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Criticism: some religions, scholars, and philosophers objected to anthropomorphic deities. The Greek philosopher Xenophanes argued against the conception of deities as fundamentally anthropomorphic. But if cattle and horses and lions had hands or could paint with their hands and create works such as men do, horses like horses and cattle like cattle also would depict the gods' shapes and make their bodies of such a sort as the form they themselves have. Ethiopians say that their gods are snub-nosed, sigma iota mu omicron upsilon sigma, and black Thracians that they are pale and red-haired. He said that the greatest God resembles man, neither in form nor in mind. Both Judaism and Islam reject an anthropomorphic deity, believing that God is beyond human comprehension. Judaism's rejection of an anthropomorphic deity grew during the Hasmonean period, when Jewish belief incorporated some Greek philosophy. Judaism's rejection grew further after the Islamic Golden Age in the 10th century, which Maimonides codified in the 12th century. In his 13 Principles of Jewish Faith, Hindus do not reject the concept of a deity in the abstract unmanifested, but note practical problems. Lord Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, verse 5, that it is much more difficult for people to focus on a deity as the unmanifested than one with form, using anthropomorphic icons, because people need to perceive with their senses. In Faces in the Clouds, anthropologist Stuart Guthrie proposes that all religions have anthropomorphisms that originate in the brain's tendency to detect the presence or vestiges of other humans in natural phenomena. In literature, religious texts, there are various examples of personification as a literary device in both Hebrew Bible and Christian New Testament, and also in the texts of some other religions. Fables. Anthropomorphism, sometimes referred to as personification, is a well-established literary device from ancient times. The story of the hawk and the nightingale in Hesiodd's works and days preceded Aesop's fables by centuries. Collections of linked fables from India, the Jataka tales and Panchatantra, also employ anthropomorphized animals to illustrate principles of life. Many of the stereotypes of animals that are recognized today, such as the wily fox and the proud lion, can be found in these collections. Aesop's anthropomorphisms were so familiar by the 1st century CE that they colored the thinking of at least one philosopher. And there is another charm about him, namely, that he puts animals in a pleasing light and makes them interesting to mankind. For after being brought up from childhood with these stories, and after being as it were nursed by them from babyhood, we acquire certain opinions of the several animals and think of some of them as royal animals, of others as silly, of others as witty, and others as innocent. Apollonius of Tyana. Apollonius noted that the fable was created to teach wisdom through fictions that are meant to be taken as fictions, contrasting them favorably with the poet's stories of the deities that are sometimes taken literally. The same consciousness of the fable as fiction is to be found in other examples across the world. One example being a traditional Ashanti way of beginning tales of the anthropomorphic trickster spider Anansi. We do not really mean that what we are about to say is true. A story, let it come, let it go. Fairy tales. Anthropomorphic motifs have been common in fairy tales from the earliest ancient examples set in a mythological context to the great collections of the Brothers Grimm and Perrault. The tale of two brothers features several talking cows, and in Cupid and Psyche's Zephyrs, the west wind carries Psyche away. Later, an ant feels sorry for her and helps her in her quest. Modern literature, building on the popularity of fables and fairy tales, specifically children's literature, began to emerge in the 19th century with works such as Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, The Adventures of Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, and The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, all employing anthropomorphic elements. This continued in the 20th century, with many of the most popular titles having anthropomorphic characters. Examples being the tales of Beatrix Potter, The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, and Winnie the Pooh by A. Milne. In many of these stories, the animals can be seen as representing facets of human personality and character. As John Rowe Townsend remarks, discussing the Jungle Book, in which the boy Mowgli must rely on his new friends the bear Baloo and the Black Panther Bagheera, the world of the jungle is in fact both itself and our world as well. A notable work aimed at an adult audience is George Orwell's Animal Farm, in which all the main characters are anthropomorphic animals. Non-animal examples include Rev. W. Awdry's children's stories of Thomas the Tank Engine and other anthropomorphic locomotives. The fantasy genre developed from mythological, fairy tale, and romance motifs and characters, sometimes with anthropomorphic animals. The best-selling examples of the genre are The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, both by J.R.R. Tolkien, books peopled with talking creatures such as ravens, spiders, and the dragon Smaug, and a multitude of anthropomorphic goblins and elves. John D. Ratliff calls this the Dr. Dolittle theme. In his book The History of the Hobbit, and Tolkien saw this anthropomorphism as closely linked to the emergence of human language and myth. The first men to talk of trees and stars saw things very differently. To them, the world was alive with mythological beings. To them, the whole of creation was myth-woven and elf-patterned. By the 21st century, the children's picture book market had expanded massively. Perhaps a majority of picture books have some kind of anthropomorphism, with popular examples being The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle and The Gruffalo by Julia Donaldson. Anthropomorphism in literature and other media led to a subculture known as furry fandom, which promotes and creates stories and artwork involving anthropomorphic animals, and the examination and interpretation of humanity through anthropomorphism. Various Japanese manga have used anthropomorphism as the basis of their story. Examples include Squid Girl, Hotelier, Axis Powers, Up Hotter, and Arpeggio of Blue Steel. In film, television, and video games. Some of the most notable examples are the Walt Disney characters, the magic carpet from Disney's Aladdin franchise, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Goofy, and Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, the Looney Tunes characters Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and Porky Pig, and an array of others from the 1920s to present day. In the films Cars, Cars 2, Planes and Planes, Fire and Rescue, all the characters are anthropomorphic vehicles. Discussing Madagascar, Escape to Africa, and Europe's Most Wanted, Laurie suggests that social differences based on conflict and contradiction are naturalized and made less contestable through the classificatory matrix of human and non-human relations. In the motion picture Fantastic Mr. Fox, most of the characters are anthropomorphic animals very similar to the style seen in the furry fandom. They are given especially human characteristics such as body shape, hands, and clothing among other things. Most of film director Mark Dindal's projects, Cats Don't Dance, The Emperor's New Groove, Chicken Little, and The Emperor's New School, feature anthropomorphic animals. Cats Don't Dance's cast includes talking animals. New Groove had an ink and turned into a llama. Chicken Little had an all-animal cast. And New School feature the main characters getting turned into various animals throughout the entire show, almost every episode. Television since the 1960s. Anthropomorphism has also been represented in various animated television shows such as Biker Mice from Mars and SWAT Cats. The Radical Squadron. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, first aired in 1987, features four pizza-loving anthropomorphic turtles with a great knowledge of ninjutsu, led by their anthropomorphic rat sensei, Master Splinter. Tugs is a British children's series, set in the 1920s, featuring anthropomorphic tugboats. They moved like real boats but would sometimes perform certain actions without the aid of humans although not seen. Like real boats, they obeyed maritime laws but would sometimes perform actions of their own will. In the American animated TV series Family Guy, one of the show's main characters, Brian, is a dog. Brian shows many human characteristics. He walks upright, talks, smokes, and drinks martinis, but also acts like a normal dog in other ways. For example, he cannot resist chasing a ball and barks at the mailman, believing him to be a threat. A Canadian-New Zealand-American animated TV show called Turbo Dogs starred anthropomorphized dog characters. In 2010, a French-American animated TV show The Mysteries of Alfred Hedgehog was mostly consisted of woodland anthropomorphic characters. A British TV series, Thomas and Friends, features anthropomorphized trains, airplanes, helicopters, and cars. Both the YouTube series The Annoying Orange and its American television adaptation The High Fructose Adventures of Annoying Orange feature anthropomorphized fruits and vegetables. An American-Canadian series, Johnny Test, features a talking dog named Dookie, who is genetically engineered by the title character's sisters, which they all try to keep a secret from anyone else. Video games Sonic the Hedgehog, a game released in 1991, features a speedy blue hedgehog as the protagonist. This series' characters are almost all anthropomorphic animals such as foxes, cats, and other hedgehogs who are able to speak and walk on their hind legs like normal humans. As with most anthropomorphisms of animals, clothing is of little or no importance, where some characters may be fully clothed while some wear only shoes and gloves. Another example in video games is Super Mario Bros., which was released in 1985. Some of the characters include Yoshi, a dinosaur who is able to talk, run and jump, and Bowser, a Koopa that is able to perform most human characteristics, with some exceptions, as he can breathe fire. Radio programs The Signature Series is a radio program based in Canada that explores the personality traits of the 24 keys of Western music by personifying them and giving each key a gender, a story and specific character traits. Art history. Klaus Oldenburg's soft sculptures are commonly described as anthropomorphic, depicting common household objects. Oldenburg's sculptures were considered pop art, reproducing these objects, often at a greater size than the original. Oldenburg created his sculptures out of soft materials. The anthropomorphic qualities of the sculptures were mainly in their sagging and malleable exterior, which mirrored the not-so-idealistic forms of the human body. In Soft Light Switches, Oldenburg creates a household light switch out of vinyl. The two identical switches, in a dulled orange, insinuate nipples. The soft vinyl references the aging process as the sculpture wrinkles and sinks with time. Minimalism. In the essay, Art and Objecthood, Michael Fried makes the case that literalist art becomes theatrical by means of anthropomorphism. The viewer engages the minimalist work, not as an autonomous art object, but as a theatrical interaction. Fried references a conversation in which Tony Smith answers questions about his 6-foot cube die. Q. Why didn't you make it larger so that it would loom over the observer? A. I was not making a monument. Q. Then why didn't you make it smaller so that the observer could see over the top? A. I was not making an object. Fried implies an anthropomorphic connection by means of a surrogate person, that is, a kind of statue. The minimalist decision of hollowness in much of their work was also considered by Fried to be blatantly anthropomorphic. This hollowness contributes to the idea of a separate inside, an idea mirrored in the human form. Fried considers the literalist art's hollowness to be biomorphic, as it references a living organism. Post-minimalism curator Lucy Lippard's eccentric abstraction show, in 1966, sets up Brian E. Furr's writing of a post-minimalist anthropomorphism, reacting to Fried's interpretation of minimalist art's looming presence of objects which appear as actors might on a stage. Furr interprets the artist's eccentric abstraction to a new form of anthropomorphism. She puts forth the thoughts of surrealist writer Roger Kailas, who speaks of the spatial lure of the subject, the way in which the subject could inhabit their surroundings. Kailas uses the example of an insect who, through camouflage, does so in order to become invisible, and loses its distinctness. For Furr, the anthropomorphic qualities of imitation found in the erotic, organic sculptures of artists Eva Hesse and Louise Bourgeois are not necessarily for strictly mimetic purposes. Instead, like the insect, the work must come into being in the scopic field, which we cannot view from outside. Mascots. For branding, merchandising, and representation, figures known as mascots are now often employed to personify sports teams, corporations, and major events such as the World's Fair and the Olympics. These personifications may be simple human or animal figures, such as Ronald McDonald or the ass that represents America's Democratic Party. Other times, they are anthropomorphic items, such as Calliope or the Michelin Man. Most often, they are anthropomorphic animals such as the Energizer Bunny or the San Diego Chicken. The practice is particularly widespread in Japan, where cities, regions, and companies all have mascots, collectively known as Uruchara. Two of the most popular are Kumamon and Funisia.